What about nitrosamines and the health concerns related bacon? I'm going to use as reference an article that I did a couple of years ago, Regulations of Nitrate and Nitrite post 1920s, the problem of residual nitrite. And there's a lot more in this article than what I'm going to share with you, but I'm going to try and just touch the highlights here. The first issue, the first thing that we must remember is that the use of nitrites, NO2 in bacon, or to cure meat, was approved in 1914 in Germany at the start of World War I, where saltpeter had to be reserved for the war effort. The curers then came to the government and said, "You want us to feed thousands of troops and do it quickly, cure quickly. And how do we do it without saltpeter? We want to use nitrites." It was known that nitrites cure meat faster than saltpeter, and the government allowed it. In the United States, the first recorded direct use of sodium nitrite occurred in 1905, and the USDA approved its use for food additives in 1906. In 1910, there was a landmark case which I write extensively about. I will also post a link to that article. I actually can't remember the title now. And it related to the use of the formation of nitrites in bleaching flour. And what is interesting about the 1910 court case is that it brings to the fore the public perception about nitrite, the very negative perception of the public about nitrite. Nitrates, NO3, was being viewed with in a positive light from a health perspective. Kerner, in the mid to early mid 1800s, did this groundbreaking work, which I referred to previously, about Woersgift, sausage poisoning, botulinum, and he found that where nitrates were not used, where saltpeter was not used in the sausages, it led to Woersgift, to botulinum, which was pervasive at one point in time, right? And as a result of the use of nitrites and saltpeter, we managed to eradicate that largely around the world. Then there was another interesting article towards the end of the 1800s where a newspaper reported on the health of workers in saltpeter mines, in caves, where they mine saltpeter. And they said that the workers had excellent health, and they related that to the saltpeter. So it was not necessarily viewed with negatively, but nitrites, NO2, were viewed with suspicion. Nitrites is about 10 times more toxic than nitrates. In 1923, the Bureau of Animal Industry commissioned in the United States commissioned a study to investigate the direct addition of nitrites in meat. And they commissioned researchers led by Kerr, 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 and his co-workers under supervision of the Bureau of Animal Industry, conducted several experiments. And and they wanted to see, can we use nitrites directly in curing of meat? They first wanted to understand from an organoleptic perspective what we can see with our senses, experience with our senses, smell, taste, and so forth. Is it equivalent, nitrite curing to saltpeter curing, NO3 curing? And they found that that is indeed the case. Then in 1925, so 23, the study from Kerr et al. Started. In 1925, a Chicago-based organization, the Institute of American Meatpackers, which was a collaboration between the big meatpacking companies in Chicago, Gustavus Swift, Phil Armour, Nelson Morris, Dold, and others were part of this consortium, in cooperation with the University of Chicago, conducted some studies. And just as a little introduction to the Institute of Meatpackers, American Meatpackers, their stated objective was this: to find out how to reduce steers to beef and hogs to pork in the quickest, most economical, and most serviceable manner. So on the one hand, they wanted to do this as healthy as possible, and on the other hand, they wanted to do it as quick as possible. Yeah, and now all the critics come and say, yeah, because they just wanted to make money off it. No, it's not just because of the money, because the quicker they could do it, the more affordable it would be for the consumer. So it was also in the consumer's interest. So I don't really buy this thing about the meatpacking industry that is so evil and those kind of things. And there's a lot of voices in America and in Europe and in Britain making this allegation, which I find completely unfounded. So, and the American and Meat Packers, the Institute is an example of one of those organizations who set out scientifically to investigate this thing. And they brought out a document in 1925, the use of sodium nitrite in cured meats. And I just want to quote one paragraph from this article. They said that the reduction is the first step in the ultimate formation of nitrosohemoglobin. So the reference that they had was to nitrosohemoglobin, the coloring principle, they called it. So they did their studies on hemoglobin, which is blood plasma, not on myoglobin, which we find in the muscle. So in the protein. So the protein, myoglobin. Why? Because at that point in time, they did not know how to isolate myoglobin. So it was the easiest to use hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is a fair comparison. What's worked for hemoglobin works for myoglobin as well. We discovered that later. And they said that their studies revealed that to change the nitrate to nitrite, they understood that the reduction had to take place, a bacterial reduction. And then the chemical reduction would further have to happen to nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is the thing that cures meat. Does nitrates cure meat? No. Does salpeter cure meat? No. It is nitric oxide. They understood all these things. But they said the change of nitrate to nitrite is by no means complete and varies within considerable limits under operating conditions. So the bacterial reduction was not always consistent. Right. So they said that if accordingly, let me read from them, from the document, accordingly, the elimination of this step by the direct addition of a small amount of nitrites means the use of less agent and more exact control. That is very important. So they said that we can get better consistent curing, which means better products to the consumer and better control of the nitrites. The nitrates is going to change into nitrites in any case for curing to take place. But that step is uncontrolled. So if we can control it, so it is good. The fact that we're using sodium nitrite is not a bad thing. Right? And they recognize that. Now, so we spoke about Kerr et al. And his study. Then we jumped in with the study by the Institute of American Meat Packers. Now we return in 1926 to the study of Kerr et al. And they focused in on the issue of, they brought out their report and in 1926, and they started to hone in on the issue of dose dependency of toxicity. So they understood that in order to eliminate any possible harm to the consumer, they had to set limits in terms of how much nitrite, NO2, can be introduced into the meat. And so those studies those reports were taken seriously, and those recommendations were adopted by the government. And the first project, let's call it that, from the meat industry in collaboration with the government to make sure that the consumers get healthy cured meats to eat was to limit the amount of ingoing nitrites. Right, so that is the first thing. Then there were some changes made to these limits. It was reduced in 1931. And then the next major issue occurred in 1960, right, in the end of the 1950s and in 1960. And up to this point, the thought was that the only concern about nitrates was its dose dependency. How much do we use in the meat? But in the 1950s and 60s, something happened. Let me read from my article. In the late 1950s, an incident occurred in Norway involving fish meal that would become a health scare rivaled by few in the past. In the 1960s, researchers noticed that domestic animals fed on fodder containing fish meal prepared from nitrite-preserved herring were dying from liver failure. researchers identified a group of compounds called nitrosamines formed by a chemical reaction between the naturally occurring amines in the fish and sodium nitrite. Nitrosamines are potential cancer-causing agents, and their potential presence in human foods became an immediate worry. An examination of a wide variety of foods treated with nitrites revealed that nitrosamines could indeed be formed under certain conditions, especially under frying conditions of bacon when it's fried to a crisp. This fundamentally shaped the focus of the work that started with Kerr and co-workers in the 1920s in response to the general toxicity of nitrites to the specific issue of N-nitrosamine formation. Reviews from 1986 and 1991 reported that 90%, up to 90% of 300 nitrosamine compounds that was investigated and tested in animal species, including higher primates, caused cancer. But there's not been a single study that I'm aware of done in humans to see if it actually leads to cancer. But it is because of this overwhelming evidence that we have from primates and from other animals, it is fair to assume that there will be that there's a huge risk for humans as well. Studies as was done on children and to understand do they have an increased risk. And back in the 1970s, so grave was the concern in the United States that they seriously considered an outright ban on the use of nitrites. So, what is nitrosamines? Right, nitrosamines, and is nitrosamines only formed from nitrite, which is in bacon. Nitrosamines, there's two main ways that nitrosamines are formed in the human body. One is we ingest it when we fry bacon. It's not formed in the human body, it's formed in the bacon, and then we ingest the bacon at frying temperatures. This makes bacon a slightly higher risk category in terms of this. And then even when it's nitrates that was used, the nitrates, when it's ingested, bacteria converts it, and there's a reaction that happens with secondary amines, as I said, and N-nitrosamines are also formed. So it's not just nitrites that is at issue, it is in the human gut, also nitrates that is an issue. So the question must now be asked, is nitrosamines only an issue related to bacon? The answer is absolutely no. Right? Nitrosamines is something that we started looking out in all foods, and we found out that it is not just the direct application of nitrite that leads to, or nitrates, NO3 or NO2, that leads to nitrosamine formation. It is or can lead to nitrosamine formation. It is also in how the food is prepared, direct flame and those kind of things that is used. And then we found that it is present in beer, it's present in some cheeses that we produce, and there's a whole host of risk factors that increase the potential for the formation of nitrosamines. And this is the province of food scientists, and we regularly look at that and try and eliminate those things. So the question comes in: is there an equivalence between bacon and cancer? As it seems to be from so many people quotes these studies that seems to indicate that the media portrays this image that if we eat bacon, we are inviting cancer into our lives. Let's first ask the question: if in the first place, even the formation, even the possible danger of nitrosamines and the risk of cancer formation, even that is dose dependent. So if you look at the very small amount of bacon that many people eat, myself included, a couple of rashers a week at the maximum, that is one thing. If you compare my lifestyle with somebody else who will eat a kilogram of bacon every single day, I mean, obviously the risk of is elevated in that instance, and it is clearly not the same. Secondly, up to 80% of our nitrite, NO3 and NO2 ingestion comes not from bacon but from leafy green vegetables. So without even going further into the science of this thing, we can just logically sit as human beings and ask ourselves the question: if the the reporters are so absolutely petrified about bacon, and they're doing this reporting from a clear public health perspective. Surely they must be drumming the fact that we should stop eating leafy green vegetables. And why? Because leafy green vegetables, as I said, gives us 80% of the nitrates that we ingest. And we know that the bacteria that reduces nitrates to nitrites they're present in our mouths. Right? As I explained in the first video that we did, our bodies continuously pump out nitrates, NO3, into our mouths as a defense mechanism against pathogens, harm-causing bacteria that enters our bodies through our food. And the first line of defense happens in our mouths. As we chew the food, the nitrates enter our body generates nitrates itself. There's a nitrogen cycle that happens in our body, and part and parcel of this is the formation of NO3s. NO3s come into our mouths excreted through our saliva glands, and as we ingest leafy green vegetables, for example, in our mouths, bacteria sitting under our tongue or on our tongue very quickly starts converting the NO3s into NO2s, and chemically they change into nitric oxide. And the nitric oxide, as is the case in bacon and in other cured meats, they immediately start attacking these harm-causing bacteria. And so that's the first defense. This process continues in our stomach and in our gut, that the NO3s continue to change into to NO2s and to NO, and the NO2 in combination with the NOs, the nitric oxide and the nitrites, attack possible harm-causing bacteria in our gut. So I will understand it if the news media is and the celebrity chefs, especially in the United Kingdom, and we all know who I'm talking about, drums up the fact that we must stop eating leafy green vegetables. And the worst thing that we can do is put lettuce on our bacon. So if we come and put an equivalence with if we say that McDonald's is causing as much harm to the consumers by putting lettuce on the bacon, how dare they put lettuce on the bacon? They are poisoning, they're causing cancer to the public. If they come with the same veracity with the claims, and the news media reports this with the same vigor and aggression, then there will at least be consistency in terms of how the media is dealing with this issue. But the way it's happening at the moment is completely over the top and inconsistent. And so there's no rational basis to single out the use of why we should not eat bacon or cured meats. It's completely ludicrous. So in the first place, the complete inconsistency with how the media is handling this thing actually reveals their true motives. The bacon, unfortunately, is an easy target, right? And then many of these studies, I looked at some of these studies. There's a company in the United Kingdom, and most of the people looking at viewing this video from the United Kingdom will know who I'm talking about, who builds their brand on the fact that they contain no nitrates. And I seriously question that, because there's subsequent studies that was done that shows that up to 20% of the NO3s, NO2 nitrites in the bacon gets converted immediately within an hour into NO. So the NO2s are oxidized and changed into NO3s in the bacon. So even if there's nitric oxide in the meat, there's a chance that the nitric oxide can be oxidized into NO2s, and the NO2s can be oxidized into NO3s. And so if you test for NO2s, the NO2 level may be below the detectable level. Right? But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be NO2s in the bacon in 2 or 3 weeks' time, because the NO2s are going to start breaking down. The NO3s are going to start breaking down into NO2s again, and you will find nitrites in the bacon. So, and I looked at some of the studies that they put on their website, and I read all these pages and pages of the reports that they put out. And many of the researchers don't even, they ask a question. For example, what do you classify as they ask the consumers, they send out a questionnaire, the people who participate in some of these studies, and they say, do you regularly eat or consume processed meat. And there's no generally agreed upon definition of what is processed meat. A lot of consumers include mincemeat, for example, under processed meats as well. And mincemeat is by no definition part of processed meats. It's not smoked, it's not cured, the salt is not added, and those kind of things. So, and then the issue of if we look at bacon and we look at hams, are there other things that can be causing health? Is it necessarily the nitrates and the nitrites and the nitric oxide? Which one is it? Right? Because we are dabbling in this thing in such an elemental basis that we're not rigorously going to the bottom line and say what is the reason that there seems to be an increased health risk associated with the consumption. People who consume processed meats seems to, in certain studies, to suffer more from certain ailments. But without properly understanding the lifestyle of those consumers, do they smoke, don't they smoke? Do they drink, don't they drink? How much do they drink? What else do they consume? Do they drink a lot of beer? Do they maybe drink a lot of beer and maybe even water that may be contaminated with nitrates? And as a result of this, the loading of the nitrates into the system is way higher than it should be, which may be a reason why there's problems. So instead of stopping to eat bacon, they should maybe start to drink less beer or eat less of a certain type of cheese. So the portrayal of this issue is completely one-sided in the media. The industry started tackling this thing by looking at the question and asking the question, then what else can we do to eliminate nitrosamine formation? So there's two vitamins, vitamin C and vitamin E, that binds to nitrosamines quicker, that reacts with the secondary amines quicker, and nitrosamines are not formed if those two vitamins are being consumed. And so what the industry did was to make it mandatory that in bacon production and in ham production, vitamin C and a whole host, vitamin C in particular, in the form of ascorbic acid and even its isomer, erythrobate, should be included with nitrite. So by doing that, they, to a large extent, eliminated the possibility for nitrosamine formation. And they eliminated this direct link to cancer. So the bacon industry has for years addressed this issue very systematically and very vigorously. And another thing that they did was to, previously they used to use NO3 and NO2 in combination. And what they discovered was that NO3 becomes a reservoir for continuous formation of NO2s, because bacteria that's in the meat continue to break down the NO3 into NO2. So they, around the world, they eliminated, they outlawed this practice and said you can only use NO2. By forcing only NO2, they ensured that when the consumer gets the bacon on the table or the ham on the table, there's no more, or there's very low levels of residual nitrite left in the bacon. So the issue became residual nitrite. How much is left in the bacon? Because when you fry it and when you ingest it, if there's no more nitrites left in the bacon, there's going to be no possibility for nitrosamine formation, right? Then the second thing is the addition of the ascorbic acid, vitamin C, which is going to react with the secondary amines very quickly, and it's going to prevent the formation of nitrosamines. And the third thing that they did, even from the 1920s, was to limit the amount of ingoing nitrites into the when bacon is cured. So by employing these mechanisms, the meat industry, by and large, ensured that bacon and cured meats does not pose a risk for cancer. Now, a lot of people still disagree from this, right? And a lot of media outlets report that this is not the case, that that risk is still there. So when you compare this now with leafy green vegetables. And beetroot, for example. If you eat beetroot, there's a lot of NO3s entering your system. Oh yeah, but there's a lot of vitamin C as well. No, the vitamin C is sitting in the leaves. The vitamin C is not sitting in the bulb. So if you think that the vitamin C that's part of the plant is going to protect you, you better make sure that you consume the entire plant, the leaves and the bulb. Otherwise, you're not going to get the vitamin C that's going to protect you against nitrosamine formation. So, and these health focuses is not being placed on evenly across the spectrum, which really puts a very big question mark about why are they targeting people who's eating bacon. I think one of the reasons why they do that is because people like to strawman certain positions, and they build a strawman that is not a real representation, but it's an easy thing to use as for target practice. Keyboard warriors can sit and they can write long dissertations about this thing, copy and paste a lot of articles, and come up with a lot of reasons why bacon is the worst thing. And this adversarial type of reporting gets a lot of likes on Facebook and on different social media platforms. And we know that if we just think about what's happening in America, this type of anybody who's adversarial and who's aggressive against or for something tends to make the news, and people who's more evenly looking at all the facts, wanting to consider everything, those people very seldom they seldom make the news. But the reality is that it is an overhyped issue. And in terms of the health issues of, we're going to get more into this. It's I want to make this short, and I'm already over the time that I wanted to allocate to this. We'll get to, there's more to this, and let's delve into this when we look at this next week again.